Hey, it's Chris Schmidt with the Average Joe Sports Show. Nebraska, Indiana, that quest of relevancy.
And in a game like this, Dylan Raiola, what kind of a day does he need to have?
I'm Bill Doleman. Let's go old school and give me some fullback.
Hi, it's Elijah Herbel. We'll also take a look around the Big Ten. Who is the fourth best team? We'll discuss that before we make our predictions for Nebraska, Indiana. It's on the Average Joe Sports Show.
Welcome into episode 62. It's the Average Joe Sports Show. Bill Doleman, Gary Sharp, Elijah Herbel, Chris Schmidt. It is Indiana week, the 16th ranked Hoosiers, the ranked Huskers. Guys, is it kickoff yet? How we feel?
You know what? I think as the more I look at this matchup, like if you can neutralize and get to Alford, there's no way he's going to be able to get rid of it to Calvert Cheney.
Well, and you got to watch those staggered screens for Keith Smart on the baseline.
You got to keep Benson off the boards.
Yeah. Juve Blob, you also don't, if you can block him off the edge.
Wow.
And as long as you keep things under control, I mean, but you actually want to put Indiana in a binder because you're thinking that Coach Knight on the sidelines will just lose it and he'll punch a unassuming Nebraska player. Get a 15-yarder, and that could change the whole course of the game.
You guys remember when Bob Knight came to Vanny?
Yes.
With Texas Tech? The student section was all wearing hunting gear because Bob Knight put a cap in someone's ass on a hunting trip the previous fall.
He pulled a gore?
I mean, it was an air quote accident. I think he was hunting with Ted Williams, and unfortunately for Ted Sr., it wasn't Ted Jr. that got it, so.
Legit. So he pulled an Al Gore. I didn't know that.
Yeah, I remember he walked in the post game, and it was in the old wrestling room at Devaney, and it was intimidating because you had to be right up on him so you could hear him talk. I don't know about this game. Like, it probably is because it's on the heels of the bye week and we haven't had football in a while. And I don't know. I'm kind of – people are going back and forth trying to determine if Indiana is good. I'm just going to lay it out there as we continue tonight while we're recording this. Indiana's a good football team. I just wonder, man, when you don't face your toughest team until week 7, how do you react? But if Nebraska happens to win this game, this is a good win. I'm not going to knock Indiana, but I think it's just you don't know enough about Nebraska. You don't know enough about Indiana, and you just, Elijah said it best before we started recording. You just want to get to the game, and I think you kind of feel that from the people that have talked the first 2 days of the week. Yeah, let's just play football on Saturday. Thank God it's an 11 a.m. game.
Yeah. And unlike the heels of that, Gary, I owe you an apology. We'll get to that here in just a second, most likely. But sticking with football first, because let's lead it off with the good stuff. The feel I get is just like, man, with Nebraska, if they go in and lose this football game, Husker Nation will say, you lost to Indiana, and yeah, it's the best season they've had in 4 decades, which isn't really true, but that's going to be the feel that you get. That sucks. This Nebraska team isn't that great. Whereas if Nebraska wins it, everyone's going to turn around and say, well, Indiana, they were maybe a bit of a paper tiger, 6-0. They didn't really play anybody. It's not that great a win. Like, it feels like Nebraska, it's the ultimate game of style points don't matter. Just go in there, get yourself a win, get out of Bloomington, get on to Columbus, and remain at least nationally relevant enough that Nebraska-Ohio State means something. That's the goal this week, because I don't think no matter what the performance looks like, you're going to impress anybody against Indiana despite what they've done so far this season.
If you go back in time, just getting back to let's get this game going, back in the day when it was Nebraska, Oklahoma, and you typically had a bye week and then you had to wait until Thanksgiving or to that Friday, you were marching toward the Oklahoma game, which you had been marching toward all season. And now we got a bye week, and yeah, Indiana's getting a lot of headlines and a lot of attention, but there has not been much juice for this game forever. So I think that there is a certain amount of let's get this thing going, because the anticipation for Indiana just has not been there. Now, I wonder with Indiana, okay, you mentioned we don't know what do we not know about this game? We don't know really Nebraska's offense yet. Indiana, they haven't played anybody of substance yet, so those numbers that they have statistically are inflated. The one thing that I think we do know is that Nebraska has a really good defense. Okay, so that I think is the known quantity. The Illinois game aside, Nebraska's defense could be the most determinant factor in this game, and it's not going to surprise anybody if Nebraska dominates the game defensively. Another thing about Indiana's statistical output, there might be pressure on them a little bit they got to match 30 and 40 points because that's what they've been doing, and that's what's been getting the attention this season is their high-powered, high-scoring, high-production offense. Nebraska's been in some slugfests. So if that game becomes a bit of a slog and it's Nebraska's defense, Indiana's, the pressure to produce may get to them, right? We're not scoring like we have been. This hasn't been as easy as it has been. Meanwhile, Nebraska's slogged it through against Purdue, had a slugfest with Illinois, won a tight battle against Rutgers. I think to a certain extent that if it's an ugly game, that does benefit Nebraska.
I think the experience Nebraska has had this season shows up Saturday. I think the experience of the hype and the venom for Colorado. I think the spotlight with Illinois, Big Fox on a Friday, and knowing how that didn't go your way, and then trying to shake out of imperfections, right? The special teams being the roller coaster they are. Is it an offense that shows up in the first half and then goes away in the second half, or is it the Rutgers, I should say, the Purdue situation where the offense finds some rhythm and gets going to the tune of 21 of the 28 points? So I'm anxious to see at this point in the year, defense, yes, is known. Special teams has been focused on and harped on since the past two debacles, Purdue and Rutgers. What do I get from the offense? What do I get from the offense? What do I get from the game plan? And what do I get adjustment-wise in the second half once presumably Indiana's defense figures out what you're doing if Nebraska can get off to a good start? There's so many questions I have on offense, Sharpie. I know there's talent. I know there's playmakers. I know there's intent for balance. But I haven't, at this point in the year, 7 weeks in, I've seen an offense that goes milk carton from time to time.
So can I, before we discuss that, can I go back to something? And I'm curious on you guys' thoughts, because Bill, you brought something up that sparked about winning and finding a way to win and along those lines. And I think Nebraska across the board has a more talented roster. But could we make a case on Saturday? There are more guys that will be wearing the home uniforms than the road uniforms that have had success and know how to win.
You can make that case big time.
When you have, James Madison was very successful. They were in the spotlight last year. Remember, game day was there. That's kind of when the rest of the country found out who this Signetti guy is. And he's brash, but his mouth has also cashed the checks that, have been issued here. I think they have more guys that know how to win, so it's been a good combination. I'm curious if you guys feel the same way. If you look at that of finding ways to win, not finding ways to lose in a game like this that I think is going to be tight.
They'll be confident, I think, for sure. I think the James Madison crew, the 12, the 15 guys that are difference makers for this Indiana team, they're not going to blink. I think they're going to relish the moment on a big stage. So I don't worry about them. It just kind of comes from a mentality standpoint. But again, we get to the competition level, Bill. And this is something they haven't seen, the black shirts.
Yeah, they might not blink early, but will they blink late? And if Tony White makes, some adjustments defensively like he did against Rutgers, I'm not going to put the spotlight on Nebraska's offense because I think we're all kind of wondering how that question is going to be answered. But Tony White, with what they did against Rutgers, was masterful. And if they need to make adjustments, and they've had a week to prepare for whatever Indiana's offense or whatever James Madison's offense did, So whatever game plan they have going in and whatever adjustments they need to make, I just think Nebraska's veteran defense, this is an opportunity for it to just go out and win the game. And maybe it's not a high-scoring game, and maybe it's not a big margin of victory, but it's one a little bit like Rutgers where it's 14-7, and you say that game wasn't that necessarily that close, even though they had the ball with 3 minutes to go, and we were all a little bit nervous watching the end of it. But, yeah, they've had some success, but that was at James Madison. And I know they established that program, and it got them a new job, but you're in a different league now, and it's going to get a whole lot tougher than Western Illinois and a bad UCLA team and beating Northwestern on the Chicago beaches.
And to me, I think Schmidt kind of made the point earlier of there's more questions coming into this game with the Husker offense, but I think there's going to be more of a load on the Husker defense in this football game, and both of those things can be true. I think the offense has more to prove on Saturday, but the defense has more they need to show on Saturday. If you kind of get what I'm saying there, in that there's questions on the offensive side of the ball, but the way Indiana wins football games is not a low-scoring slugfest. How they win football games is they go put up 30 to 40 points on you. Like, I'm looking back at Signetti's history at James Madison. There was only one game that when his offense put up more than 30 points, they lost. Whenever the Signetti offense puts up 30 points, they have a defense that's good enough to do enough, play with the lead, and go win football games. That's what they do, and that's why there's more that comes down to the defense for me. Like, can your defense go get some stops in the first half and give your offense a chance to play with the lead? Because that's one thing that these James Madison guys and now these Indiana guys, you look at the team as a whole, it's not something they have to do all that much, and it's not something I think the Signetti team is necessarily built for, playing from behind. They're a team that goes and grabs a lead. They don't sit on it. They go out there and they understand, their defense is probably going to give up some points, but once we get our offense rolling, we're going to keep on putting up points until the other team rolls over. What does it do mentally to an Indiana offense if they're struggling? They're putting up, 20 points through the first three quarters, and it's a tight ball game, and they're not playing the way that they're used to. What does that do? That's why I think there's more of a load that's going to be placed in the Husker defense, because to me, the ultimate key is hold Indiana's offense below 30 points. You give yourself a chance. You give your offense a chance. If that Indiana offense goes up and puts out 35 plus points, I don't see a path to victory for Nebraska.
Yeah, I think I have confidence that Nebraska defense is not going to just have a full meltdown. But I'm going to stick with the offense because I will make a case that in this game, Nebraska's offensive line is more important than the defensive line. And I'm not going to immediately go to, because they got to be able to block and they got to be able to open holes for the running game. I think because of the pass rush, and Indiana has a good pass rush, schedule aside, they still have been able to get to the quarterback in 6 games, is the fact that Nebraska may have to have a running back stay in, might have to have a tight end chip. And then also the fact of the matter is, in his first year as a freshman, where people are trying to make him make mistakes, with pressure plus pressure, Raiola's percentage is not very good. And then when the pocket is a little bit crowded, he's less than a 50% passer. So that offensive line has to be on point. Whatever they do to help out guys on the outside, I think they have to keep Dillon not only upright, but they have to keep him on his spot. And if they're able to do that, then I like Nebraska's ability to exploit the field and maybe find out if there's a tight end in these packages or not.
Well, good work with the tight end bat signal, because this is a game for both tight ends, really. Indiana's got a talented tight end, and Nebraska's got a slew of them that you're waiting for kind of a takeover game.
Well, we've had the same conversation a couple times this year, though, of, man, feels like it's a great opportunity for the tight end to really have a good game, and then Saturday rolls around, and where's the tight end? I don't know.
He had a couple of catches, and that was nice, but seal the edge. Right? It's the Average Joe Sports Show, episode 62. We want you to like and subscribe on YouTube, the Average Joe Sports Show, Spotify and iTunes, the digital download, and keep those subscriptions coming. That's Gary Sharp, Bill Doleman, Elijah Herbel, Chris Schmidt. We're previewing Nebraska, Indiana, but plenty of questions with the Husker offense. Good point, Sharpie, on the offensive line. And then, Dillon's bounce back. That's one storyline, his bounce back after a tough go in tough weather conditions against Rutgers. Do you get some aid from the running game that actually breaks one this Saturday? And then, there's been a lot of chatter on social media about the preference, and that is zone coverage for that Indiana back end, Bill. And if they go zone, Dylan, historically this season's been good against zone. But I just want to see number 15 go out there, own it, make some plays, not try and do too much, and get back into kind of that rhythm he was in early to mid part of the season.
Yeah, what did I see the social media analytics guys say? Raiola is 90% completed 90% of his passes against zone defenses and 44% against man-to-man. And Indiana's more of a zone, but may have 2 weeks now to implement some more man packages. Gary, I agree on the offensive line, but offensively for me with Nebraska, and I'm not going to say I've given up on who's going to be what in the run game. I think this is a Nair and Banks game. Those guys need to play like veteran wide receivers who are going to get separation. They're going to run some hard routes, and they're going to get open, and they're going to open enough of a window that Raiola can deliver the football and not just run patterns and get to where they're supposed to go. They need to run patterns with purpose, get open, create separation, and help him out. Regardless, I shouldn't say regardless of what the offensive line does, but this is a game for veteran receivers. I think maybe Ja'Cory Barney has been Nebraska's MVP offensively. I know Raiola has been great, but they've asked him to run. They've asked him to catch, downfield. They've asked him to catch short passes and do a lot of different things. But we're getting to the heart of the Big Ten season, and you got two guys who want to make a lot of money next year. They need to start earning it right now, not an NIL aside. So I think Nair and Banks could be really helpful for Raiola and the offensive line if they run some serious pass patterns, create serious opportunities for Raiola to find open veteran receivers who can go make plays. That will solve a lot of problems for Raiola in his freshman year in the second half of his Big Ten season.
Move the chains, take the check down, take care of the time of possession, and if the run game, I don't want to say is abandoned or is stagnant, find me some 4-yard flat passes, find me the running back out of the backfield, Sharpie, Elijah, Bill. Move the chains, just hold on to the ball. Figure out a way to do it if you got it in a short yard passing or over the middle, whatever. But just keep a hold of the football.
That's one of the most important things because Indiana's done a good job of limiting mistakes. I think one thing coming out of the bye, because we know that Nebraska did a lot of self-scouting, and they did tendencies. And you have enough tape and enough tendencies on your opponent that you kind of know by now what they're going to do. Like, Nebraska's not going to come out and look completely different after a bye week. But where I do expect them to be different, and I don't know what results this will add, I don't think Nebraska will be as predictable in the run game. So that, hey, when Ramir's on the field, we're going to do this. The defense knows if Emmett's on the field, we're going to do this. If Dowdell's on the field, more than likely we're running between the tackles. I expect them to not be as predictable with their personnel. And then there's the element in the run game because I almost feel more confident to say Nebraska will move forward via the pass than they will the run. I mean, I can't imagine Nebraska stays 13th, 14th in the league in yards per carry, but there's nothing, Nebraska just has okay running backs. But is this where you see, the more counters, the fullback, the jumbo package, those kind of things? Do you run more outside zone? Do you get creative? Because I think we're banging our head into the wall. Elijah kind of alluded to it on a previous show. We're banging our head into the wall thinking Nebraska's running game all of a sudden is going to improve overnight. Mm-hmm. It just is what it is. Okay? It's okay offensive linemen with okay running backs, and Nebraska doesn't have a quarterback run game. It is what it is. And so you have to scheme the heck out of it just to get yards. But it would help if you can get the passing game going to open it up a little bit where people have to respect that a little bit more, and they're not inching towards the middle of the field that they have to respect that you're going to burn them deep. And Nebraska hasn't had the propensity to let Dylan cook deep in the last couple of weeks.
And my thought on that, which Husker fans aren't going to like, but one of the things I think Nebraska might need to do a little bit more of to open up some of that rushing attack is airing it out on 1st and 10. Husker fans don't like it. I don't like it. But that's been my biggest complaint about Satterfield this year, and Gary laid it out. It's been predictability offensively. Like, based on down and distance, there's a 90% chance you can guess what Nebraska's next offensive play is going to be. If it's 1st and 10, it tends to be one of those zone or duo looks. If you get down to 2nd and short or 3rd and short, that's when Nebraska will pull out more of the power counter type downhill rushing attacks. If Nebraska finds themselves 2nd and medium to 2nd and long, you've seen some draws, some screens, or it's Raiola dropping back. 3rd and long, Raiola's dropping back. Like, based on down and distance, and that's not the worst sin to have if you're an offensive coordinator. There's a reason why that so many offensive coordinators do it, and it is predictable. It's because the analytics will tell you 1st and 10, the best thing to do is usually run the football. And 2nd and short, it's to pull out one of those power counter schemes, downhill rushing attack. It's a reality of football. That's usually what's best to do. But if you want to open up some rushing lanes on 1st and 10 or even on 2nd and short, I'm with you, Gary. You got to go deep. You got to give the defense that thought in the back of their head that, you know what, maybe this isn't going to be a rushing play. Maybe we need to be ready for the play action here. And that's what I'm talking about when I talk about Nebraska getting creative in the rushing attack, which I said last week on this show is you need to have ways that you stress the defense in a sense that is not physical. It's not 5 guys in the offensive line wearing on you as the game goes on. Nebraska doesn't have the pieces for that. Nebraska needs to stress the defense and get them thinking and not reacting whenever it comes to the rushing attack, if you kind of catch what I'm saying. Whether that's getting Harburg in, whether that's airing it out a little bit more on 1st and 10 and thinking this could be a pass. There's ways to do that, to get creative in the rushing attack that aren't just, you know what, we're going to dial up a different rushing play here. Like, you need to be able to stress the defense in ways that are not physical.
You can go quick game and stress a defense and throw on first down. I like what you're saying. Get me Nair, get me Banks deep, get me a tight end up the seam off some play action. Totally get it. All that being said, though, I mean, you could get Lloyd on some misdirection, seed it briefly a couple of times, or if you get good downfield blocking, that means Bullock better be in. You can find Barney on a 3-yard little pop pass or quick little hitch and see what you can do in the short game. I love throwing on first down, but it better be completed and not be a TFL, because Nebraska's had that issue and they have thrown on first down, at least early in the year.
I was going to grab a cigarette of satisfaction when Gary mentioned the fullback. I mean, why not line, the double L's of Lindenmeyer and Liebentritt, and if you're gonna run Dowdell between the tackles, put somebody in front of him to get to that hole first to hit the linebacker, because when the running back is going to run between the tackles and there's nobody in front of him, that just allows those linebackers or the defensive line to fill up that hole right away. So put one of those guys in there and let them create some space and give the ball to Sam Schmidt or Lance Lewis or something like that, and let him hammer for some extra yards, because you're right. If Dowdell's in there, it's going between the tackles or maybe just between the guards, right?
Yeah.
But maybe if you got somebody that's there as a lead blocker, maybe that helps him get, instead of 3 and 4, maybe 6 and 7. And that might change things on second and third. I don't know, but I wouldn't mind seeing a fullback as a lead blocker in that offense. Sure, is it predictable? Absolutely. But it's just man on man, and we're doing the Oklahoma drill in pregame now, so might as well do it in the game too.
So, question, did you just create the T-shirt? It's not quite Catholics versus the convicts, but did you just create the T-shirt slogan that's going to be sold all morning and all Friday night, all Saturday morning? That T-shirt, cigarette of satisfaction.
Might be what it is in Indiana. Yeah. Well, no, that's for them.
Hey, make your money any way you can. If you got a chance, you got.
Look, I'm trademarking Colorado Vitamins. I might as well do that while I'm at it.
I mean, we've got the Catholics versus the convicts. The what was the cow? The
woke versus Coke.
Yes,
woke versus Coke. And Doleman's very own, trademarked here on the Average Joe Sports Show pod, the cigarette
out of satisfaction.
Yeah. I mean, there's enough Marlboro knockoffs running around Bloomington. that Joe Buck's been even wearing for Signetti.
Well, and everybody thinks you've been rolling your own since you were 5. So, I mean, I think we got a theme going here.
3, but yes. You think it was cigarettes, Bill? Give you credit. All right.
What was it?
But should be all right. And Elijah he's grabbing for the bourbon right now on a Wednesday night.
I'm not yet.
You should be. The drunk version of the AJSS.
Hey, what do you think? What do you guys think? The game's sold out. The place only seats 52,000. Ironically, the last time Nebraska was there, I believe it was a day that they clinched a bowl berth in 2016, which would be ironic. It's an 11 a.m. kick. They're going to have the national pregame show from Fox there. They are imploring their fans to get there early. Their crowds have increased. They're staying a little bit longer. I think it's still a basketball school, so I don't expect it to be like Colorado-ish obnoxious. But I am curious on what do you guys think Nebraska's walking into for playing on the road for the second time this year?
They're walking into a place that has a lot of uncertainty. They're excited that they're ranked. They're excited that they're unbeaten, but they don't know what they're all about yet. And you know what? I don't think there's any fear or, it's big, bad Nebraska. It's a better Nebraska program with Matt Rule at the helm, but it's still a younger program. So I think they're waiting for good things in Bloomington to happen and just have the mother of all homecoming parties with a win to stay unbeaten and stay in the playoff race. Because right now they're probably on the outside looking in for sure, but they're in rare air right now in this Big Ten race, one of 3 unbeatens.
Well, it's going to be a much more hostile environment than what Nebraska walked into in West Lafayette. I think that goes without saying. To a certain extent, I kind of equate with what it might be like, and it certainly got more frenzied after they beat Nebraska last year going to Colorado. Colorado was coming off that week 1 win over TCU, and they had all of the excitement of the offseason over Deion Sanders. And it was justified with the win over TCU, would play in the national championship game, despite it being a completely different team. But the excitement level going into the Nebraska game was at a fever pitch, very similar to what it was for Colorado coming into Lincoln this year. I would anticipate that this is the game that fans in Bloomington finally realize, oh my God, we might actually be good this year. And this is the thing to do. So we're all going to be there, and fans are going to act like, oh, I've been coming to games for years. I've always been here. Students are going to be jazzed, but I think Nebraska, because of some of the games they played in last year, and certainly the Colorado game on the road last year, you get a sense of what that can be like. And I think Matt Rule does a pretty good job of creating kind of an all for one for all, and the world is against us based on if we die, we die mentality. So I don't think this is a Nebraska team that's going to go, oh, wow, this is really imposing going into Bloomington. There's a lot of red here. They're kind of used to that. But I think, again, I go back to the defense. And those veteran guys, I think that's a difference for Nebraska in a situation like this.
To me, what the feel prediction I have for the Indiana crowd is, if you think back, it's a team that traditionally has not been great. They're having a great season now. Fan base cautiously optimistic with what this team can be. I kind of go back to Nebraska basketball last year whenever Creighton comes to town. Nebraska's got a great start to the season. There's a lot of excitement. Everyone walks into that Creighton game. Bill and I went together. Everyone's cautiously optimistic. Baylor Shireman starts canning some threes, and that crowd shuts up real quick. It got real quiet at Pinnacle Bank Arena because you went, oh, here we go again. And I think that's what it could be for Nebraska and Indiana, is like, well, let's lay it out. Indiana, their basketball program has been disappointing over the past decade or so. They still show out for that. They're still very excited, similar to Nebraska football. Flip it around. Maybe we have something to cheer about with football. Hey, football's exciting. This looks pretty good. They haven't really beaten anybody, but they got a big test coming up on Saturday. I think there's going to be excitement pregame. People are going to be looking forward to it. Might be a loud pregame. But if Nebraska can go out and punch Indiana in the mouth early, maybe it's an early touchdown, maybe it's something good your defense does, turnover, 3 and out, whatever it may be. I think that Indiana crowd can be silenced quickly in the game just because of the years and years of terrible football they've had to watch, barring the one Michael Penix year. Like, a lot of bad football you've had to watch, and let's be clear, that was 2022, so there weren't even any fans in the stands for that Michael Penix year. Like, I think if Nebraska goes out there early and gives Indiana a good punch, that might be able to shut up those Indiana fans, keep them quiet, because you know what? They're coming in probably saying, man, maybe this team is good this year. If there's the one indication that maybe they're not as good as they thought they could be, the nervous energy will kind of kick up, and Indiana fans will go, oh, here we go again.
So the real ones in the Bloomington crowd on Saturday will either have an Anthony Thompson, Antoine Randall L., or Von Dunbar jersey.
Wow.
Those are the throwbacks that Bill's talking about.
Well done, Antoine Randall L.
That was the only one I could think of. I was trying to go
supposed
to my
to be in
Rolodex.
Lincoln, wasn't he? Like, yeah, because Uncle Charlie's like, yeah, we were trying to get Antoine Randall L. here, and Bernardo ended up getting him. But that was supposed to be the quarterback post Crouch in Lincoln. Him and Vince Young. They were two guys they were eyeing.
Well, we'll have to do a off-season podcast on the ones that got away, because we would put together a national championship team.
Yeah, no kidding.
Yes, you could. Yes, you could.
Now, was Antoine Randall L. Sorry, I remember him in my early days. He was an absolute weapon in Madden as a kickoff returner.
That's code for your old.
Was it him?
I remember when he was returning stuff in the Super Bowl against Seattle.
Yeah.
Was it him or was it Hines Ward that didn't have an ACL? Because I know one of them didn't, and it like kind of boggled the imagination. That like, oh, that guy's playing without an ACL.
I think Hines wrecked a lot of ACLs, but I don't.
Question.
Yeah, I don't. It might have been Antoine Randall L. Like slash after slash, right?
I'm going to admit I did not study the knee structure of former Indiana quarterbacks and wide receivers, so I'm out.
How about this? Okay, NFL players who played without an ACL. John Elway played his entire NFL career without an ACL after tearing it in high school. Joe Namath played his entire career without an ACL. He ruptured it in
What
college.
might have been?
And it was Hines Ward. He played his entire NFL career without an ACL.
Where'd Hines go to college?
Georgia.
That's what. Well, yeah, I was asking Elijah.
Oh, sorry, my bad. My bad.
Georgia. It was Georgia.
Guys, let's spend a couple more minutes on Indiana. We'll go around the Big Ten, some interesting matchups in the league as well. But give me a couple of X factors here as we kind of wind down Nebraska, Indiana. I'll start with you, Sharpie. Give me an X factor or two for a Big Red victory.
Offensive line, as I mentioned earlier. I also think, wide receiver, I think Nebraska needs to be better, have better wide receivers than Indiana's wide receivers. And Indiana has two guys that I would put in the top half of the duo in the Big Ten. And then I think the other one is Nebraska's linebackers have to be really, really good.
Yes.
They have to tackle well. They have to recognize stuff really well. And they got to keep things in front of them, because even though Tommy Hill is back, I can't sit here and say, man, Nebraska is going to be locked down on the back end. I think offensive line, I think wide receivers, and then I think linebackers is where Nebraska has to be better than Indiana in those categories.
Bill?
Two. One, special, two, teams. Nebraska's they have had to have spent the last 10 days seriously chasing three. Well, I mean, now you do have it. Brian Buschini is really pretty remarkable in that you have two punts blocked and you're the special teams player of the week. And you get a black shirt out of the deal. I mean, that's one of the most remarkable weeks that I can recall for anybody, and maybe one of the most incredible football honors since Dave Remington won Big 8 Player of the Year offensively as a center. But Buschini's been a weapon, and the punt blocks. Yeah, does he need to get it off quicker and recognize one step versus three? Probably, but he's still a weapon. I think he may be the best punter overall in the Big Ten because he's come through for Nebraska. But the kicking game, and when it comes to the field goal opportunities and getting points on the board, it can't be for Matt Rule. Do I go for it or do I kick it here when I've got a 35-yard field goal try? If you get it inside 40 and you can't move the sticks, that should just be automatic. And I think that they're gun shy anytime, that they have to consider chasing 3, and they're going to go for 7. So what the kicking situation is, I don't know. I don't know what Alvano's situation, how healthy he is. I don't know if John Hold's more confident. I don't know if they found a long snapper in the last 10 days. I'm sure that they've been drilling it pretty good. But Nebraska special teams outside of Buschini, they've got to be productive and put points on the board. That to me is the single biggest X factor in this game.
To me, the X factors aren't as much X factors as they are just fundamentals. Like you win this football game if you tackle well, first off. That might be the most important X factor that you have. Gary kind of laid it out. You can't let Indiana's 5 yards become 25, 30, 40, 50. They got to go earn every single yard on that field because their offense is good. It's going to pick up yards. You can't let, I guess, a 20-yard gain turn into 6 points as opposed to giving yourself another chance to get a stop inside the red zone. Going to be absolutely massive. First guy there has got to be the first guy to bring him down. Along with that, you can't give away free yards. You got to make Indiana's offense earn everything. Penalties. Got to win the penalty battle on Saturday because if you let Indiana start getting some free first downs via penalties, you're in a tough spot. Like your defense is already in a tough spot against this high-powered offense. You can't make it any easier than it needs to be. And then last thing, just because we're going to hit the Big Ten trifecta, tackling, penalties, time of possession. Go win the time of possession and make sure that every single time Indiana's offense makes a mistake, which it will make some mistakes. That's what happens with your timing game, RPO, screen game. Like, anytime they make a mistake, it has to be magnified via that time of possession. Like, Nebraska goes out and wins this game in the way that so many Big Ten teams beat Scott Frost over the course of his tenure at Nebraska. Go win those 3 things you can win because what would happen is Nebraska, they probably had the better offense in that football game. They're picking up yards. They're getting points. And then here's the one big mistake, whether it be a penalty or a turnover, that the other team can take advantage of because they've won the time of possession. They're not shooting themselves in the foot with penalties. And that one mistake gets magnified because there's fewer possessions in a football game. Those are the things to me that are going to be paramount. And it's just classic keys to a Big Ten matchup that we've heard time and time again.
Here's one thing that would also concern me is if Nebraska gets down 2 scores early. I could see where Tony White can, make some defensive adjustments, but Nebraska's offense is having a hard time coming from behind. And I don't know that we've seen that much this year. But if Nebraska gets down a couple of scores and that crowd gets into a frenzy, and then it ends up being like a 17-7, type game that they just couldn't put it together on the offense. Meanwhile, they shut the Indiana offense down the last 3 quarters of the game. But even a 2-score deficit was too much for an offense that just isn't, producing in big numbers. I think that would be a concern for Nebraska.
Yeah, does 10 feel like 21? And that's my X factor here is what is Sat's game plan to get his quarterback in rhythm, get him comfortable, to hone in on what you can hammer away at with the Indiana defense. What are they going to allow you to do? And then once they adjust to what may be working for you, what's your change up? What else do you have up your sleeve so you're not just watching the clock and trying to burn it down? Add to a lead, keep scoring, whether you're ahead, behind, whatever the case may be. Just give me 0 disappearing possessions. I can't do another 5 consecutive 3-and-outs. You can't win another football game like that. I mean, you might be able to, but against this offense, it's a hell of a risk. So give me defense, made some adjustments against Rutgers, right, with that bare front. Wonderful. It's the offense's turn now to complement the defense, and it might be the offense's turn to go outscore somebody in a race to 30. That's my X factor, is what's the offense do? What's the game plan? What's the adjustment like after halftime? So Nebraska and Indiana gets going. Relevancy, a word that's been a buzzword for Elijah and I this week. This Saturday, next Saturday, the grand scope of Nebraska being relevant. Rules talked about it. You're relevant right now. You've got the stage, Sharpie. And Nebraska's got an opportunity here these next 2 Saturdays to add to, enhance, or take away from the rep they're trying to build.
Yeah, I mean, I think Nebraska has been relevant to a degree. You know, I mean, look at TV ratings. You can judge off that. It's just backing it up. I think there's a part of Saturday, and I think Nebraska's 2 toughest remaining games are the next 2 weeks because of who are they facing and the scenario that they're facing. Ohio State's the best team left on the schedule. And I think the dynamic of playing on the road at Indiana that is ranked, that's got some momentum, feels really good about themselves. You're coming off a bye. They're coming off a bye. That's why I say these 2 teams. But I think it's the relevancy part of this thing is moving forward. Like if Nebraska goes on Saturday and gets beat because Indiana made 1 or 2 more plays, okay. But if Nebraska has one of those meltdown games on the road where, again, they shoot themselves in the foot, we all go, man, I saw this like 3 weeks ago and nothing's changed. So staying relevant, staying in the conversation, because if you do happen to win on Saturday, you're going to be ranked again, and everybody seems to be searching for that 4th Big Ten team to throw into a mock college football 12-teamer before the first one is announced on November 5th. Indiana shows up in a couple of places. Nebraska wins in Bloomington. You know, who knows what happens in Champaign with Michigan, Illinois. Nebraska could be back in the playoff discussion ahead of Ohio State, and that's a whole nother discussion next week.
Really fast, if you are a Husker fan that's hoping for a college football playoff berth this year, thinking way too far ahead, are you rooting for Illinois or are you rooting for Michigan?
I think you root for Illinois because that eliminates Michigan, and there's still some landmines left for Illinois.
Well, the thing is Michigan, considering what has already happened to them this season, it might already be eliminated because I don't think there's any chance in hell they go beat Ohio State the last week of the year. But on the flip side, an Illinois win would make Nebraska feel a little bit better about themselves because of that loss, and maybe makes that loss look a little bit better. As the College Football Playoff Committee says, it's a quality loss. Like I'm kind of torn on that.
No, I think Michigan is. I think Michigan has 8-4 written all over them.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, it's one of the bigger games they've had in Champaign in a while. You know, I mean, everybody's trying to find that 4th team in the Big Ten, and even if you're 9-3, I mean, will you get the benefit of the doubt? Depending on what the quality, if you have quality wins over quality losses. So in that case, I think I'm rooting for Illinois because it just helps. Hey, Nebraska lost that game. Being if Nebraska wins this weekend, Nebraska lost that game. Okay, that's, I guess, now a quality loss. But then they've added what I think would be a quality win.
I think Michigan right now is destined to break out all of their welcome to San Antonio paraphernalia, all the memorabilia from Alamo Bowl games past. Just book it, you know, just have a nice season with a new coach.
Check out the Riverwalk.
Yeah, let's just come on. They're not going to the playoff. That's just not going to happen. And you know they're going to get smoked by Ohio State, or if they win that game, then Brian Day's looking for a new job. There's no doubt about that. But I think Michigan is just getting acclimated to life post Harbaugh.
What really fast? San Antonio paraphernalia. What is that? Is that like Charles Barkley was? Is that churro? What is that?
No.
No.
All those old bull shirts that Nebraska fans have tucked away, they'll be able to pull them back out. Yeah. Is there angst? Do you guys sense angst of, God, please just get to 6. Please just get to 6.
I don't think so. Because I think Nebraska fans know that there's another win coming.
Yes.
So I don't think the angst of last November, you know, because it looked like after the win over Illinois that Nebraska was going bowling, and then it wasn't happening, and then it wasn't happening, and then it was 13-10 after 13-10 after 13-10, and then it was like, oh my God, surely they're going to beat Maryland. Surely they could maybe be. No, that was angst. I think you look at the schedule now and you go, thank you, Deshaun Foster. We look forward to seeing you later on this season in Lincoln.
Fair enough. Weekend Big Ten football. Iowa, a wow win as they dismantled Washington, and Washington on the heels of that Michigan win. You have USC that lost another heartbreaker They lost at home a double-digit lead to Penn State. Penn State gets to put their feet up for a little bit. Of course, Illinois, Michigan, that's the elimination game we talked about. Indiana, Nebraska, the other side of that. And then you've got some big ones looming. You know, it's interesting here to get ahead for 2 seconds. Nebraska is at Ohio State. Ohio State plays Penn State following the Nebraska contest. You have Wisconsin that hosts Penn State. So you got a couple of potentially tough opponents before that Ohio State-Penn State showdown here in about 3 weeks. So where do you guys who do you put number 4 right now in the league? Behind Ohio State, behind Oregon, behind Penn State. Who is number 4?
The team. I would say
go ahead.
Iowa. I would say Iowa, maybe, or the winner of Nebraska, Indiana.
Okay. No Illinois?
They've got a tough schedule coming up. I got 3 more tough games coming.
I think if I had to do it today, just by virtue of their 6-0, and they've been a gaudy kind of 6-0, I would put Indiana, Illinois, Nebraska, Iowa. But it's all kind of like 4, 5, 6, 7 can be interchangeable. Mm-hmm. But it's a good, I think who wins the game on Saturday in Bloomington is the 4th best team in the Big Ten.
To me, if Illinois beats Michigan, they might be in that 4th spot. But I'm kind of with you in that Indiana, Nebraska, likely, depending on what the performance looks like, could also be number 4. So it becomes a toss-up to me, and you're playing the if game. I also really like Iowa. Iowa's schedule down the stretch really sets up for them to be that 4th team. In terms of talent, do I think they're the number 4 team? But in terms of how their schedule sets up and what they can be in November, knowing how Iowa plays football, I think they might be my likely pick to end up being number 4. But I think if we're going power rankings, it's either going to be Illinois or the winner of Indiana and Nebraska. That's your number 4 team after this weekend, depending on what happens in that Michigan and Illinois game.
Here's one of the reasons why I put Iowa there. Their schedule, for one, they have Nebraska at home at the end of the year. I think that's a plus in their category. Now, whether they beat Nebraska at home, but I think that you say if you can win out and beat Nebraska at home, that's good. And we're not on the Brian Ferentz countdown like we were last year. What was it? How many touchdowns scored or how many yards they gained or whatever? They've sort of solved their problems offensively. They do have some semblance of offensive production, minus the Ohio State game. So the fact that they've rectified that gives them also a check in that category.
Team that you least likely want to see right now, is it
Iowa?
A rejuvenated Wisconsin? Is it the Fighting Flex, who could be 3-1 in the league? Is it Iowa because they have a little bit of a run game? Their quarterback still isn't that scary. Is it Washington because while they are up and down a little bit, they've got a pretty high caliber starting 22 from a talent standpoint, despite the rating that went on. And of these teams that are kind of log jammed, who do you not want to see on your schedule?
I love the question, but I think college football this past weekend and really kind of through the first 7 weeks has taught us that it's week to week. Like all of a sudden, Wisconsin looks different. Mm-hmm. Is that because they lost a running back? They lost a quarterback? Iowa looked about as close to a finished product as I've seen all year against Washington. But what if they struggle against Michigan State?
Nice.
But Iowa is one of those teams because I think Iowa's got one of the better running backs in the country. If there wasn't a guy from Boise State that was running amok, Caleb Johnson would be maybe the leader to be the Doak Walker Award winner. I think Tim Lester's a good offensive coordinator when it comes to the run game. I like some of the things they do. Iowa would be the team that I don't want to play right now. But you do bring up Minnesota. I think we can all acknowledge PJ's a good coach. You just have to take what comes with Fleck. What they did the last 2 weekends, winning in the last minute, shows me something about Minnesota, and then also goes back to the week to week. How in the heck did they lose to North Carolina in week 1?
Kickers.
Yeah,
the guy that drilled the walk-off against Nebraska was had a for sale sign in his front yard after that Carolina game.
My thing is, so with Iowa, if I'm looking at it from a Nebraska point of view, I actually think Nebraska matches up well with Iowa. I might save some meat on the bone for later in the season, but like a lower scoring affair against the Hawkeyes, like I don't hate Nebraska's chances in. I might actually say Minnesota being the team you don't want to face, because PJ Fleck's the kind of coach that maybe he's a front runner, but whenever his team is doing well, he's the type of guy that has the juice to keep them rolling. They never seem to get too high on themselves, the Golden Gophers. Like PJ Fleck's a great motivator whenever his team is winning. That's a team that's starting to pick up some steam. I wouldn't want to play Minnesota at all, actually. Maybe it's just because they've had Nebraska's number over the past 5 years or so, but that's a matchup that scares me, because once Minnesota gets rolling, PJ Fleck's the kind of coach that gets the best out of his team whenever they're feeling good about themselves.
And then gets out of town.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, what's funny about Fleck is they could have packed it in. They got whacked at home by Iowa.
Yeah.
That's a monster rivalry game. And they get owned. They bounce back, get screwed at Michigan.
And yes. Which has really kind of flown under the radar, by the way, in what happened in that game.
With the onside kick. And then they say, all right, here comes USC. SC's fresh off their dismantling of Wisconsin in the second half. And then they win in the final minute, and then they go on the road after beating SC and take out maybe the last breath of UCLA this season. That's a hell of a stretch.
Yeah.
Maybe he's promising his players and motivating them to do what Signetti did with James Madison. If we win, we're leaving, and I hope you can all come with me to Florida.
He's got a goldfish in his hand. He's going to Jerry Maguire. Who's coming with me?
And if Kiffin goes to Florida, y'all can come with me to Mississippi. We're getting out of here, boys. We're getting out of here.
No, he's got a pedestal. It's in glass on the practice field. It's full of Fleck bucks, and everyone can take a Fleck buck after a win. That's what I think it is.
Casinos, warm weather, and lots of lakes to row boats. Not as many as Minnesota, mind you. But at least it won't be frozen.
Have you seen the tailgates in the Orchard?
The Grove. Get it right. Well,
the Grove, my bad.
I've told this story before. The Grove's electric. It's the only place I've ever been where it's beer is outlawed and you can only drink hard liquor. Not a joke. I am not kidding. They will make you pour your beer out in the Grove and make you go get yourself a glass of Jack Daniels. It's one of the most backwards things I've ever seen, but that's the way it works down there.
Sounds like heaven, quite frankly. I love it. That's Bill Doleman and Elijah Herbel. Gary Sharp, Chris Schmidt. It's the Average Joe Sports Show. We'll do our predictions here in a second.
We're do predictions here in a second, because I do need to get to an apology to one Gary Sharp.
I don't know what this is about.
So on Sunday during our show, Gary, you were wearing a beanie, and we gave you some hell over it. And I asked me. I asked the question, like, there's this newfangled thing. Have you heard of it? Of in-home heating, and I say that because I went golfing yesterday morning. It was quite cold. I was wearing my beanie. I get back home. And nothing I can do all day long warms me up. I end up wearing that beanie in for our afternoon show. Turns out the heating has gone out in my house. I have no heating. It's cold. I'm wearing a beanie everywhere, and it's absolute karma. So I'm trying to make it right by apologizing to you. So I am sorry for making fun of you for wearing a beanie.
You're a big man, Elijah.
Thank you. It is bad.
No, it is getting cold in Nebraska, though. So, yeah, I was probably in the wrong there. That's my bad.
All right. Like and subscribe to the Average Joe Sports Show YouTube. Check us out on YouTube, and then Spotify and iTunes for the digital download. I'll jump into the pool first, and you know what? Just not ready. I don't like all that needs to happen in Bloomington for Nebraska, and I just don't think they play well enough to win. And I think 30 is that number, and I think it's Indiana 34, Nebraska 21.
Win and cover for the Hoosiers.
Mm-hmm.
What is the line now?
6.5. 6.5.
Okay. Backing up a little bit.
I'll jump in next. I will say I think Indiana's offense is going to get theirs in this football game. I am not at all sold on this Indiana defense. I do think that they're probably going to play some zone whenever you are what you are at this point in the year. Yeah, you can use a bye week and try to throw some things in. I don't think they trust their guys out on an island. So I think they're going to play some zone. I think Dylan Riley is going to have one of his best games as a Husker coming back off of a bad performance against Rutgers. He's had an entire week to think about it, digest, make some improvements, and now get ready for Indiana coming off of the bye. I think he has a great day. I think the running backs do just enough. And I think Nebraska ices home a victory. Give me Nebraska 35, Nebraska 35, no field goals, Indiana 27.
Okay.
I think Indiana is a good team, but I'm uncomfortable that it has taken until Game 7 for them to face a team that is this physical and is this good defensively and is their best opponent. And we'd be doing the same thing if Nebraska was in Indiana's shoes. So with that said, I like if you're going to give me 6.5, and I'm going to jump on when I see a 7 to take Nebraska getting 7 points. I'm going to do that every day. And why? That in this matchup, I have gone back and forth. I didn't have a great feel the first couple of days of this week, but I feel a little bit more. Give me Nebraska 24-20.
Okay.
I'm going to say Nebraska's going to take a page out of Fred Hoiberg's playbook. They beat Indiana 86-70 last year. Now that game was in Lincoln. So I think pretty similar to that. Did they play at Indiana?
They played in Indianapolis in the Big Ten tournament.
Yeah, well, they won in Bloomington 85-70. It's a consistent game plan. There you go. So I think Nebraska's defense is the factor in the game, and I do think Indiana might get the early lead. I think Nebraska makes adjustments in the second half, and if I got to give you a score, I'll say 20-17 Nebraska.
I thought you were going to go 85-70.
Well, I did, but just just to play along with you guys. But I think Hoiberg's influence on this is all over it.
Well, can I ask a quick prop bet question here, if you don't mind? Just a prop bet. Indiana has scored first in every single game they've played this season. They have never trailed in a game this season. Who scores first on Saturday?
Indiana.
I think Nebraska takes the football and goes down and scores first. That's my take.
I think Nebraska early in the first quarter is very aggressive.
Mm-hmm.
And if I had to go a prop bet on that, I would say Nebraska scores first. I think, and just on the prop bet, I think the other thing, guys, is what does the fourth quarter look like? Mm-hmm. Because Nebraska hasn't been able to play 4 quarters. But if you look at Maryland and Northwestern, Maryland late in the third, it was tied at 21, I believe. And then if you look at Northwestern got it into the fourth quarter, and they were behind 27-24. What scares me about Indiana, and again, I just said that Nebraska is going to win 24-20. I feel more confident that Indiana can hit the X button in the fourth quarter than Nebraska can.
Yep.
Or execute a 4-minute offense where you squeeze the life out of the game and you preserve a victory.
Or if you got to get a score like Rutgers did and couldn't do it, Indiana could. But again, I still think Nebraska's defense is pretty good.
Yeah, I'm with you. I mean, I don't know, you guys are all, you follow the analytics. The stop rate, which very rarely has a Nebraska defense been that high. I mean, Nebraska shows up 6th in the stop rate. And they got to create a little bit more havoc, but I don't know. I like the defense being portable on the road.
No, I think they absolutely can be. I just worry about getting any help from their other 2 phases this deep into the season. Well, join us Sunday for the Average Joe Sports Show Live, the Sunday Live Pod, 10:30. Coming up on Sunday, reaction to Nebraska, Indiana.
For an hour. We got an hour. We got an hour in us this week. It was a bye week. We had things to do last Sunday.
We'll give you an hour and then keep on keeping on if we need to. Gary Sharp, Bill Doleman, Elijah Herbel, Chris Schmidt. Thanks for tuning into the Average Joe Sports Show. Subscribe and like on YouTube, Spotify, and iTunes. We'll talk to you Sunday morning.